All right, this afternoon we're convening to talk about the escape of the 4 juveniles on Saturday night. The 2 components of the police department who have been leading the search efforts, the Juvenile Crime Task Force and the Youth Services Division. Lieutenant Blaine Whited heads the Juvenile Crime Task Force. Captain Tommy Widener heads the Youth Services Division. Both of them will talk about the search efforts since Saturday night, what we've been doing, and they'll take any questions from you. And at the conclusion of your questions on that part of the investigation, Chief Anderson will then take any questions you have about the Major Case Task Force involvement. Lieutenant White.
Thank you all for coming and meeting with us in reference to this very important topic that's concerning our community right now with 4 dangerous youth that are now back in our communities after their escape from the juvenile justice facility. So Saturday night, the Juvenile Crime Task Force had officers working. We responded to the call for service that they placed into our Department of Emergency Communications Center, and we're on scene within a matter of just a couple of minutes after them placing that call. However, we know now that that call was severely delayed prior to the juveniles actually escaping, approximately 35 minutes between their escape and us being notified. So we were looking at least a 35 to 40-minute window before we arrived on scene, giving them a huge window to make their escape back into our community. We are very involved in trying to get these youth back off of our streets and back into the custody of the Juvenile Justice Center. So we have learned a lot in the last couple of days. Our investigation is extremely active. We have not run into any dead ends yet. We are constantly pursuing very active leads. No one is sitting around waiting for a call for service or waiting for information to come in. We have more than enough information to go around and leads to pursue currently. Currently, our information shows that these youth more than likely had some assistance once they were outside of the Juvenile Justice Center, and we are following up on those leads. The Juvenile Crimes Task Force, being in service now almost 2 years, has had exposure with all 4 of the youth who escaped. So we are familiar with them and their associates. So we are investigating thoroughly into the youth, their associates, and their family. We have made numerous visits to all their known locations and their associates' locations, and we will be continuing to speak with any individuals who know them. But our investigation shows at this point they had assistance. So we're asking for anyone in our communities that know where these extremely dangerous youth are to call us. Call our Emergency Communications Center, call our Crime Stoppers tip. You can remain completely anonymous and get cash for that information. But we know that these 4 youth are not in our communities, out in the streets right now. They're being helped. They are inside a residence somewhere being helped. And it is against the law to harbor these very dangerous youth who are still in our streets. So we will be continuing nonstop to get these youth back into the custody of the Juvenile Justice Center. Currently, the Juvenile Crime Task Force has been split up into 2 different separate teams, so that way we can maximize our coverage, almost operating on a 24-hour basis. And we will continue to do that until we have all 4 of these youth back into custody. We're currently partnering with our Youth Services Division, who's headed by Captain Wider, and also our gang detective investigators are assisting us in trying to capture these 4 youth. I'm going to turn it over to Captain Widener before we do any questions he might actually ask or answer any questions you might have.
I think in addition to what Lieutenant White had said, the Youth Services Division detectives continue to supplement the men and women from the task force. We continue to follow up on leads. Detectives have worked around the clock, just like the Juvenile Crime Task Force officers, to follow up on those leads as they've come in. We've had detectives here 24/7 since the incident was reported late on the 30th. We'll continue to reach out to the community on any leads that they're able to provide us and follow up as soon as we get that information. You know, obviously, those people that see this or that are watching this, there's individuals in the community who know where these 4 juveniles are. We ask for their assistance, 2 of which are accused of homicide. The other 2 have past issues with firearms and robberies. So we're not talking about juveniles that have, loitered or curfew violations. We're talking about some serious crimes. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions that you all may have.
Any questions about the search?
Lieutenant, somebody told me at the juvenile court today that had you all been called right when they found out about it, right when somebody knew about it, you probably could have swept the perimeter, probably found these kids. Do you think that's fair? Is that accurate?
I would say, due to its geographic location, it would have allowed us to establish a pretty tight perimeter, and we would have had a pretty good success rate, I think, of actually capturing them had we been notified the second that the staff recognized that these youth had gone missing.
Have you all released the BOLO in adjoining counties?
Let you answer that since NCIC.
Yes, we have. We've entered the juveniles in the NCIC. We've alerted other partners and other jurisdictions so they also could be on the lookout for addition, as it relates to safety of not just the general public, but also the officers as they may encounter them. And to follow up as it relates to just missing persons or runaways and juveniles in general, anytime you deal with youth and time is such a factor in any investigation, and as soon as we're able to get resources and components there, our success rate, is obviously increased. So that time as it gets longer makes it more difficult, but
Is Robertson County one of those jurisdictions?
correct. When we enter something in the NCIC, basically it covers the state of Tennessee so that those individuals are alerted to anything dealing specifically with these juveniles and what they're wanted for.
You've talked about these kids having help once they got outside, but what about when they were inside?
That we don't know. The investigation on that end is still ongoing. As with any investigation, we really let the evidence kind of follow us as to where we're going. At that point, I'm not really sure. Our main focus at this point from the Juvenile Crime Task Force and the Youth Services Division has really been focusing on locating the 4 juveniles, getting them to surrender, pleading for the public's help that we could get them turned in, get them safely off the streets and back into the detention center where they need to be. And then once that's kind of addressed, then we could look at the other aspects as it relates to that.
And you talked about them having help as well inside, or excuse me, on the outside. How would they have communicated with these individuals to arrange this? And how are their communications being monitored?
That I'm not 100% sure on the inner workings of the Juvenile Detention Center and what liberties they have as it relates to the ability to make phone calls or to use technology or devices as it relates to that aspect. But if you have a 30, 35, 40-minute window and you're downtown once you've been released, it kind of increases your opportunity, at least at that point, to arrange a ride and to get out of the city. If you think of 35 minutes, even as traffic has gotten to the point where it is now within the city, you can get pretty far with a 35-minute window at 9 o'clock at night on a holiday weekend.
Do you have any indication on if they're still in Davidson County or if they might be elsewhere?
As of right now, we don't have any indication that they're outside of Davidson County.
So
When did
do
you-
you believe they're in Nashville?
I don't know that, but I don't have any indication that they're outside of Nashville.
When did you all issue the alert to other agencies?
That's done immediately.
I'm not exactly sure on the exact time. It was soon after the incident was reported that the NCIC was entered. But if you needed an exact date and time, I could get you that, but I don't have that right now. But, as it relates in our experience with juvenile offenders or juvenile crime, often, as you see when y'all report, juveniles rarely commit crimes alone or act in a silo or by themselves. So oftentimes, even if these 4 are not together anymore, oftentimes these juveniles are going to go back to acquaintances or people that they've had relationships with in the past. So if any of those or their family members are watching this, please assist and let us know if they happen to come across these juveniles.
Captain, do you know if they have a gang affiliation?
That I do not know.
Do you believe the juveniles are still together?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure if they broke into 2 groups of 2 or, 2 and 1 and 1. I'm not sure, but I think information that we've gotten up to this point as the evidence through the investigation has led us that we've kind of gotten to the point where we think they've at least separated to some degree.
What are you advising the public at this point, other than to stay vigilant? Is there reason to believe that, they could try to get into people's property to hide away, like a spare shed, a car, things like that? Or are you very much convinced that they are being helped by people that they already know?
Well, I think first off, as parents and people in the community, you need to be mindful of what your children are doing and who they're interacting with on social media. One, if there's acquaintances or friends of these juveniles and you as their parent or a friend happen to know that of their whereabouts, please let us know. We're trying to get them to either surrender or get information where we can resolve this peacefully. You know, again, the two of these have been accused for homicide. They have history of gun possession, stolen cars, and other violent offenses. So again, you know, it's been stated, but to reiterate it, we're not talking about skipping school or curfew violations or underage drinking or smoking. We're talking about some serious allegations.
You guys have both made clear about all that could have been done in this 35-minute potential window that these kids had. Is there anything that you'd specifically like to say to this contracted company that allowed this 35-minute window to take place before you guys were notified?
I don't have anything to say, no.
Has it been a tip that's led you all to strongly believe they're being helped by somebody outside? Is it a tip that you all?
Oh, well, I don't know necessarily if I know it's one tip. Obviously, at this stage, you have 4 juveniles that range in the age from 15 to 17. They escaped, and we know when they left the facility they were on foot. We know they're no longer on foot, so they're all, you know, at this point, we know they're getting assistance. Now, to what level, degree, how many people are involved? We're more than one day past the incident, so we know they're sleeping somewhere at night. We know they're laying their head down. We had information that they've been immobile in vehicles. So how many are helping? Don't know, but we know it's not them acting alone.
Lieutenant, there's a certain number of people working on this, on the Juvenile Crimes Task Force, that could be doing something else if they hadn't escaped. Can you give me a sense of how much of the resources this now taxes? I mean, because I think like everyone, we would share the hope that you would be able to work on the other things that you hope to accomplish. I'm curious, you know, what the ratio is there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was looking at the overnight briefing. Noticed we had 2 robberies that occurred last night in our city that were done at the hands of juveniles. And my thought was, well, I wonder if we could have interdicted those robberies and not had 2 more victims of robbery if we had not been pursuing these 4 youth that were out on our streets. So it's consuming my entire division. I'll let Captain Widener speak to his division, but yes, that would absolutely be something that we're concerned about. And now our focus is 100% on these youth.
Can you comment at all on how your conversations with the people who are working with them day in and day out at the Juvenile Justice Center has given you any insight as to who they may be with or where they might be? I know you said you can't really comment on what happened inside because that's not your area, but in terms of how you're working with them in the investigation, can you tell us about that?
Yes, the Juvenile Court Administration has been very helpful in passing along any information that we need. We have conversations with them ongoing, daily and nightly basis. They've been available to us 24 hours a day with anything that we might need. When a question comes up or we need access to information or they have something they think is beneficial, they've been very willingly to pass that information along. So it's been very beneficial. Both sides have passed along that communication. So there's not been any roadblocks or hiccups in that. Everything is flowing well between us and the Juvenile Court Administration.
Do you have any indication on if they're armed at this point?
No.
Do you have any concerns not only about the half-an-hour window, but about the fact that the non-emergency line was called before 911?
I think that's part of it, absolutely. That will be something that the company and Juvenile Court Administration has to address, though. But yes, I think our standpoint from the police department would be we would want you to call 911.
Is this the first time an alert like this has come through 911, or would that normally go through a different pattern if somebody does escape?
I can't recall of another escape at the juvenile justice facility. We know we have had some at other facilities, but not that facility.
At other facilities, would those go through 911, or do you have?
I'm not sure.
I'm curious your perspective just because of your.
Well, let me say something about that. So, the phone call that we have heard that was placed to 911, the caller first says he called another line, and then later in the call he says he called a precinct. So we're unable to verify who or what a call may have been made to prior to the 911 call.
Was there an established policy before that in case something like this happened?
Oh, I believe that under the contract with juvenile court, the contracted company was to call 911. But as far as whether or what entity may have been phoned prior to the 911 call, we don't know specifically what that may have been because there's some conflicting information in the 911 call if you listen to it.
What does that chain of events say about their preparedness then? Imagine that's got to be frustrating for those officers.
Well, I think Chief Anderson may address that when we finish with these 2 gentlemen.
Have you all been communicating with the teen, the female inside the detention center that is thought to maybe have helped these other juveniles?
We've, every, lead that we've been given, we followed up with. I'm not specifically directing any female that was inside the facility that aided in their escape. So that's not anything that I've been given information on. Any tip that we've received, though, as it relates to any assistance or where they may be or who their past acquaintances are, we'll continue to be vigilant and follow up with those. Again, we know juveniles rarely act alone. We know they hang out with acquaintances and known people in familiar areas. So again, we're just imploring the people that may know where these juveniles are to help us out and have this come to an end peacefully.
How many tips have you gotten at this point?
I couldn't give you an exact number right now, but yeah.
You seem pretty confident that they're staying at a house or separate homes. Why are you so confident of that?
Well, I think, from my time working overnight and time being in investigations, whether it's now at youth services and other places, I think anytime, we've seen juvenile or youth out, calls come in. I can tell you, as someone who spent, a couple of years working nights as an overnight field captain, we would get those reports, hey, there's an individual who's rather young, they don't look like they're accompanied with an adult. Those calls come in, more of a check the welfare, but we get those, and you're talking numerous days after an incident's happened. This has been reported, so we know that y'all all got their, what they were last seen wearing, et cetera, out there, so we know people have been vigilant and looking for them. I think if they were just out walking around or not really being covert and moving around or in a car or in a residence, I think our chances of locating them obviously would be a lot quicker, but I think that's kind of where we're at this point in the investigation. Just, get their assistance and bring this to a peaceful conclusion.
Okay, everybody good with that part of this? Okay. Chief?
So I'll repeat what's been said previously. We've had the complete cooperation of the juvenile court, the administration. Judge Callaway called me Saturday night and we talked. Yesterday, when I read the internal investigative report completed by the contract company, frankly, I had more questions than I had answers. So I contacted Judge Callaway this morning and asked could we send a team over to do a thorough investigation so that we could find out exactly what did occur and what did not occur. So our major case task squad has made arrangements to do that thorough investigation, and Judge Callaway has been completely cooperative and welcomes the review. So without any questions.
Do you believe that there was any crime committed that we need to investigate, or why make the decision to investigate that?
Well, I don't have any indication that a crime has been committed, that there was some overt act to assist in their escape, but certainly a lot of gross negligence. I'm not sure why that after 9 o'clock, when things are supposed to be secured, that you would find it an emergency to have a cleanup crew. I'm not sure why you would find probably the most dangerous 4 people in that facility to come do that. I'm not sure why that you would leave them unsupervised. I'm not sure why that they could give a command to one of the officers there to lower the elevator to the basement, an unsecured area. So there's just a lot of questions about what went on and why it went on that we need answered. And mostly that's for the future. That's so that the juvenile court can make some decisions about what to do in the future.
And when you hear that 911 call, whatever number he called, maybe it wasn't 911 first. To me, that's surprising just because of his role. What is your reaction when you hear that there was some uncertainty as to even what emergency number?
Well, I think that we go back to what was talked about earlier. There is a detailed protocol in their contract, and obviously that was not followed. And whether they elect to call 911 or whether they elect to call 8600, there's just a few seconds difference. But obviously they need to call our communication center. where any of you would call if you had some sort of emergency. And it was probably well-intended but misguided for this particular person to be out trying to find those individuals on his own. We should have been there from the beginning. And like we said earlier, you know, given the physical location, you got a river and you got an interstate, so it'd be very easy to secure that perimeter. You know, had we been notified, had this police department been notified, and not only the juvenile task force, but you know, the patrol officers could have set up that perimeter, and then we could have conducted a detailed search of that area. Time is very precious in those situations, and 30 minutes, you know, a fast walk, you can be 2 miles away. So that opportunity was lost.
This contracted company has already said that they've put some folks on administrative leave because of this, but what concerns do you have, sort of bigger picture, in this company's ability to keep the public safe, even among some of their other employees that were not directly impacted by this escape, but may have similar ambiguities about, you know, what number to call or other policy things like that going forward?
Well, that's the whole reason for my concern and my whole reason for the call to Judge Callaway, because I wanted to give her information that she could operate on in the future. And what I saw in their report appeared to be just a pattern of maybe nonchalant behavior in that we had individuals out after the 9 o'clock time they're supposed to be secured. Why it was some sort of emergency to have this cleanup, why they were selected, why they were left unattended, why that they were able to make their way through the facility with the assistance, perhaps an innocent assistance, but the person in control of the elevator followed their commands and lowered them to the unsecured floor where they left out the front door.
And do you know where the other guy got called away to clean up something? What do you mean, like, what was he called away to do? I thought he was called away for a disturbance.
That's correct. The 4 escapees were on a cleanup detail, so they had been taken to a particular area to do cleanup. Like I say, why that was important at that late hour, I don't know. Why they were selected, I don't know. But the person watching them was called away to another situation in another part of the building, and they were left unattended.
To your knowledge, are there any Metro employees that work inside the Juvenile Detention Center around the clock?
I do not know that. I do know that there are juvenile court personnel for intake, you know, when we bring people over and so forth, so those would be available. And I'm assuming that they are Metro employees, but I don't know that.
Do you believe any of the teams were working with staff members to escape?
I don't have any indication of that.
So, I guess when I first heard about this, I thought maybe it was like a perfect storm of flukes of accidents, but it sounds like what you're describing is a potential pattern of nonchalance, as you said, that maybe made this.
Yeah, I think my first thought about it was that perfect storm, that everything just fit together. But in looking at their own internal report, I just saw a pattern of people not paying attention to what they should be doing. And so that's the reason that I called for the review. Again, I'm not seeing any criminal matter at this point. I mean, that could be brought up at a later date, I suppose. But I wanted to make sure that we know, that the public knows, and that most of all, Judge Callaway knows, so that she can take precautions in the future and make sure that the terms of the contract are followed.
To your knowledge, is there surveillance cameras all throughout the detention center, and have you all pulled that surveillance footage?
We are having everything that's available, and I do know about one outside. I do not know what they have inside in terms of surveillance cameras.
What's your reaction as police chief? You're in charge of an agency that is employing people whose job it is to work round the clock to make sure juvenile offenders are off the streets. As police chief, what's your reaction to what you've concluded as pretty nonchalant behavior from these folks who are in charge of keeping them in that building?
Well, I think most everybody in this room would have taken their job much more serious, and I think most everybody in this room would have made a call immediately. And again, we would have a much better opportunity to apprehend them before they're out in the public.
Why do you think they didn't call you all right away? Do you think there was some concern that, oh, I might get in trouble, or there might be repercussions, or their job might be something like that?
just be speculation on my part, you know, maybe that we can get things back in check before anybody knows. That's just speculation on my part.
I guess my thing I'm kind of getting from this is that a lot of what goes on inside the Juvenile Justice Center is entrusted to this outside contractor. Moving forward, how do you see the relationship between you all, the department, and the Juvenile Justice Center in terms of how you make sure that your contracts are being followed with a contractor like this?
Well, hopefully, our investigation will give information to Judge Callaway so she can make those decisions. But keeping in mind, you know, that those are her decisions to make. And I know that she wants a secure facility for the safety of the public and for the safety of the people inside that facility. So that will be our role.
Someone has told me that this outside contractor does not use handcuffs at all in the facility. I don't know if you even know. Do you know?
I don't have any information on that.
Has the investigation started yet?
I'm sorry.
Has it started yet? And then what will it entail? Are you?
The investigation?
Yeah.
About 10 o'clock this morning.
Okay, and are you interviewing staffers? What does that look like?
You know, I'm going to leave that to the persons in charge of the investigation, but certainly their first step will be to talk with Kathy Sinbeck at the juvenile facility, and she works directly for Judge Callaway, and she will ensure that they have access to everything they need.
Apologies if this has already been asked. How long has this contractor been over the facility?
I do not know.
So we've had a few instances in the last year or two of youths escaping custody from different agencies. Can you maybe contextualize for people how significant this escape is and why?
Well, I think they're all significant, and keep in mind, anytime you have someone escape, that their mindset is different, their emotions are different, and people might do things they ordinarily would not do. So we treat all of them as very serious. Obviously, with the charges that and the past history of these individuals, it makes it even more serious.
We've talked about the possible danger to the community, but these are also, they're teenagers, they're pretty young. Are you worried about their safety? Do you have any idea what's going on in their heads right now?
Well, that's the point right there. I think we all know that until we're 25 or so, we don't necessarily make the best decisions. And when you are an escapee and when you doing what you need to do, you think, to keep from being apprehended, yes. And so they're probably not making the best decisions at this point.
Kind of to that a little bit. Have you had any calls for crimes that have been committed in even the last day, where you think that you thought, hey, maybe one of these teenagers might be behind this, like a car theft or something like that?
I'm not aware, but I'll let these gentlemen speak to that. The first thing we did was check to see were there any carjackings that night, and there were not. So that's the first thing that we thought of, and then started to go through the list of all the stolen cars from that date, from that time forward. So our investigators are checking on that. We've not found anything at this point that would indicate that.
One more question. As far as just walking out the front door, were there alarms that were bypassed, or are those just unsecured doors?
I do not know, but I'm assuming they were unsecured, and if there was an alarm sounded, there's nothing about it in the report.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Receiving your question about the video, it's all being gathered in the major case task force tomorrow. They've already been in touch with juvenile court, they want all video, and it's all being assembled for them, and they will have it tomorrow.
Can we have details on when other agencies were?
You want to just put it in NCIC?
Yes.
I can, it's gonna take me a minute. I'll have to go up and access the computer and all that.
Let me say in that regard, all our other agencies, we keep close touch with them, and 'cause this is, it's not just Davidson County or Cheatham County or Wilson County anymore. It's a large area. And just from one of the things that occurred, there was a possible sighting in Clarksville. And so our people traveled up there and ruled that out. But meanwhile, the Clarksville Police Department was assisting us. I talked with the chief there this morning because we know that there might be some ties to Clarksville, and he's pledged his full cooperation.